The storm outside cracked again, hard enough that the lights flickered for a second. That second felt long enough for me to see everything differently, the shadows stretching across Adrian's face, the rigid set of his jaw, the tension in his shoulders. He was waiting for me to speak, waiting for a truth I wasn't ready to admit. I can't, I started, my voice trembling. I don't know what you want me to say. You do, he whispered. That's the problem. He took another step forward. My back touched the wall. I hadn't even realized I was moving. Every inch of the house suddenly felt too small, too warm, too charged with something unspoken. His eyes searched mine, hungry for clarity, desperate for confirmation, terrified of being wrong. I saw all of it flicker through him at once. Adrian, I murmured, please, slow down. His breath hitched, the first crack in his composure. I've been slowing down, he said, voice raw. For months. Pretending I don't see the way you look at me. Pretending I don't feel something every time you walk past me. Pretending we're just, what? Roommates. He shook his head. We're not. My heart slammed. But we can't. Why? He demanded. Tell me why. I opened my mouth, but the words tangled in my throat. He waited, eyes locked on mine, refusing to let me retreat into silence. Because it's complicated, I finally said. So am I. That's not what I mean. Then what do you mean? His voice wasn't angry, just aching. Because every time I try to walk away from this feeling, something drags me back. Today, something pushed me over the edge. That word, today, hit a nerve. What happened? I asked again, firmer. He looked away for the first time, jaw tightening. You're not going to like it. Tell me anyway. He ran his hand through his hair, pacing once before turning back to me. I came home early, he said quietly. Around 6. I didn't hear you. You weren't supposed to. A cold ripple ran through me. Why? He exhaled shakily. Because I saw something through your door. My stomach dropped. My door was open. A little. His voice dipped lower. You were sitting at your desk. Your headphones were on. My pulse spiked. What did you see? He hesitated. Then you were writing. The relief hit me so quickly I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Writing? Adrian, why would that? You were writing about me. The words hit like ice water down my spine. I froze. He stepped closer again, eyes locked on mine. I didn't read everything. Just a few lines. But it was enough. I tried to breathe, but my lungs felt tight. What did you read? For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, with brutal honesty, he said, you wrote that the house feels different when I'm home. I closed my eyes. You wrote that I make you nervous. My pulse thudded painfully. And you wrote, his voice cracked. You wrote that you don't know what to do with the way you feel around me. The air drained from my lungs. He had seen that. I pressed my back harder against the wall, heat rushing to my face, shame and panic swirling so violently that I couldn't even form a sentence. Say something, Adrian whispered. Please. But I couldn't. Every word I might have said contradicted itself in my head. Every truth felt like a lie. Every lie felt too thin to hold. He took another step, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off him. Close enough that his breath brushed my cheek when he exhaled. I'm not mad, he murmured. I'm not judging you. I needed to know if I was losing my mind. If I was the only one feeling this. I swallowed hard. I didn't mean for you to see that. I know. I wasn't going to say anything. I know. And I didn't want to make things weird. His gaze softened, just barely. They've been weird. Since the day I moved in. He reached out slowly, so slowly I could have stepped away if I wanted to, but I didn't. He didn't touch me. His hand hovered near my arm, close enough to feel but not close enough to be real. That almost touch set my entire body on edge. I'm scared, I whispered. His voice dropped to a rasp. Of me? No, I breathed. Of myself. Silence, heavy, suffocating, unavoidable. Adrian lowered his hand but didn't back away. His body was still too close, his presence too loud. Tell me what you're scared of, he said softly, everything, every feeling, every thought, every possibility, but all I said was you. He inhaled sharply. Why? Because you see too much, I whispered, my voice trembling. And I feel too much. And if I say the wrong thing, if I let myself say what I actually feel, everything will break. You'll leave. Or I'll push you away. And I don't want either of those things. His eyes softened with something like pain. You think I want to leave? You might. I won't. You don't know that. Yes, he said firmly, I do. My breath trembled, another crack of thunder shook the windows. Adrian leaned in closer, not touching, but close enough that the air between us felt electric, dangerous, on the verge of breaking open. I want one thing, he whispered. One truth. Just one. My chest tightened again. I don't, he cut me off gently. Do you feel something for me? The question sliced straight through my defenses. My throat tightened. My palms went hot. My heart felt like it was trying to escape my ribs. My voice failed. He watched me with devastating intensity. Just nod, he whispered. If you can't say it. My whole body shook. I closed my eyes and I nodded, a not big, not confident, just a small, terrified, honest nod. Adrian's breath caught, sharp, quiet, like he'd been punched. When I opened my eyes again, everything in his expression had changed. Something had cracked open inside him. Something fierce. Something relieved. Something dangerous. He lifted a hand again, slow, hesitant, trembling, and this time he didn't stop halfway. His fingers brushed my wrist, barely, but that single touch felt like the world splitting in two. I gasped, not from fear, not from shock, but from the weight of everything that touch implied. The storm outside roared louder. Inside, the house was silent, too silent. His hand lingered there, gentle, unsure, careful. Tell me to stop, he whispered. I didn't. I couldn't, and that was the moment. Everything changed forever. If you want, I can now continue with the falling action, 600 to 800 words. Oh, are the conclusion cliffhanger, 400 to 600 words. Which one should I write next? The moment after everything happened, the moment that broke the night open like a wound, hung in the air long after the sound had faded. It sat between them like a shadow neither of them knew how to step around. The room, once dim and warm, felt colder now, as if the air itself had shifted against them. She didn't speak at first. Her breath trembled, shallow and uneven, each inhale fighting its way into her chest. Her mind replayed the moment again and again, trying to understand how something so unexpected could tilt the ground under her feet. He stood a few steps away, torn between approaching her and staying exactly where he was, knowing that anything he did might push the fragile balance over the edge. The silence pressed down. A single drop of sweat slid down his temple, tracing a slow path to his jaw. He didn't wipe it away. His hands hung by his sides, tense, almost rigid, like they didn't belong to him. His chest rose and fell in careful, measured breaths, as if he was afraid of breathing too loudly. She swallowed hard, her throat tight. Her fingers trembled when she lifted them to brush her hair back, but halfway through the motion she stopped, lowering her hand as if she no longer trusted herself to do even that. Every small detail of the room suddenly felt too loud, the ticking of the wall clock, the hum of the old ceiling fan, the muffled noise of distant traffic outside his window. Everything ordinary sounded unfamiliar now. He finally spoke, but only a single word. Hey, soft. Careful. Almost pleading, but it hit her like a shock. Her gaze lifted, full of confusion, hurt, curiosity, and something she didn't want to name. Her chest tightened as she studied his face, the dark worry in his eyes, the slight shake in his jaw, the way his shoulders seemed smaller, as if carrying a weight too heavy for the room. She didn't answer. She couldn't. He took a step forward. The wooden floor creaked under his foot, and the sound sliced through the silence. She exhaled sharply, unsure whether to step back or stand firm. Her legs refused to move. Listen, he tried again, his voice more fragile this time. I didn't expect. He cut himself off, jaw clenching. He was searching for words that didn't exist, grasping at explanations that could never fully make sense. She finally forced herself to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. What happens now? It was a question neither of them was ready for. His eyes widened slightly, as if he hadn't considered the possibility that there would need to be a now, that the moment wouldn't just dissolve into the night. He looked away, unable to face the full weight of her question. His chest rose in a shaky breath, and he let it out slowly, his shoulders dropping in defeat. "I don't know," he said quietly. A crack, small but sharp, opened inside her. Not because of the words, but because of how honestly he said them. Unfiltered. Unpolished. Truth laid bare as she wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling exposed, as if the room had become too bright. Her thoughts tangled, running circles around the experience, the consequences, the questions she didn't yet dare to ask. Outside the window, a stray dog barked somewhere in the distance. A motorcycle revved down the empty street. Someone laughed 2 houses away. Life continued their lives, however, did not. He moved closer, slowly, giving her enough time to step away if she wanted. She didn't. He stopped just in front of her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath but not close enough to touch. His presence sent a shiver down her spine, a reminder of the moment that changed everything. His voice dropped to a whisper, "Are you okay?" The question was so gentle that it almost broke her. She blinked, and for a second her vision blurred. She wasn't sure if it was the dim light or the weight of everything pressing down on her chest. She nodded, small, hesitant, but he could see straight through it. "You're shaking," he murmured. She hadn't realized it. Her hands trembled lightly at her sides, like they didn't belong to her body. He lifted his hand slightly, as if to reach for her, but stopped halfway. His fingers hovered in the space between them, suspended in indecision. She watched him, waiting to see what he would choose. He lowered his hand instead. The restraint made her heart clench. A long silence stretched between them again, the kind that felt like it was holding 100 unsaid words. She wanted to ask if he regretted it. She wanted to ask if he felt what she felt. She wanted to ask if this changed everything or nothing at all, but her throat wouldn't let the questions out. He stepped back, slow and reluctant. For a moment, she thought he was going to walk away entirely, but he didn't. He stood by the doorway, hand resting lightly on the frame, head lowered. "I don't know what this means," he admitted, voice low. "But it happened. And we can't pretend it didn't." Her breath caught there. It was truth, raw and undeniable. She looked at him, feeling the shift between them like gravity had changed direction. The room felt heavier now, but also somehow more alive. As if everything had been rewired in the span of a single moment. "What do we do now?" she asked again, softer this time, almost afraid of the answer. He lifted his head and looked straight into her eyes. This time, he didn't answer, and the silence was louder than any words he could have spoken. "If you're ready, I can now write the conclusion." Cliffhanger, 400 to 600 words, with suspense, emotional tension, and an unresolved ending. I still remember the way the air felt that evening, heavy, almost swollen, as if it were holding a secret it didn't want to release. Our family house in the village always had a strange quietness to it after sunset, but that night, the silence felt different, tighter. The kind of silence that makes you listen twice. I had come to stay for a week, something I hadn't done in years. Life had pulled me away, and honestly, so had memories I never found the courage to face again. But when my aunt called, insisting the family needed help preparing for the annual gathering, I couldn't refuse. A part of me wondered if she sensed it, the tension I tried so hard to hide. The thing I never spoke about. The thing we never spoke about. My cousin, Zion, was already there when I arrived. He stood in the courtyard, unpacking crates of decorations as if nothing had changed. As if years hadn't passed. As if the distance between us hadn't been built deliberately, brick by uncomfortable brick. He looked up the moment my car stopped. His eyes locked on mine longer than they should have. A faint smile, too faint, almost cautious, appeared on his face. "Long time," he said, wiping his hands on his shirt. "Yeah," I answered, even though a dozen other words crowded my tongue. We hugged, but even that felt loaded, like there was a third presence between us, our shared memory, our unspoken history pressing its weight on our shoulders. Inside the house, everything felt unchanged. The wooden cupboards, the faint smell of sandalwood from my aunt's incense, the old clock ticking too loudly in the hallway. These tiny details wrapped around me like vines, pulling me back to a time I had tried so hard to forget. But the real uneasiness crept in when my aunt casually mentioned something that made my chest tighten. "Oh, by the way," she said while stirring tea, "Zion's been different lately. Quiet. Distracted. Keeps to himself." Her words shouldn't have meant anything. And yet, they did. Later that night, After everyone went to bed, I stepped outside to get some air. The moon hung low, casting pale light across the courtyard. And that's when I heard it, footsteps. Slow, hesitant, almost as if the person wasn't sure whether they should continue. I turned as Zion stood there, half in the shadow of the doorway. "You can't sleep either?" he asked. I nodded, though the truth was I hadn't even tried. Something had been tugging at me the moment I stepped foot in the house. A strange pull, familiar, dangerous, and completely unwanted. He walked closer, the air tightening with each step. "You know," he said quietly, "I thought you'd never come back here." There was something in his tone, something buried but alive. Something we had both agreed, without words, to bury years ago. But if it was truly buried, why did it feel like it was rising again? And why, deep down, was I afraid that I already knew the answer? "If you want, I can continue with high voltage sign rising action, 1,200 to 1,500 words, next." I still don't know what pulled me toward that night, intuition, restlessness, or something I'm not brave enough to name. All I remember is the heaviness in my chest, the feeling that something in my life had shifted long before the moment actually happened. Maybe the signs were always there, quiet and invisible, waiting for the one evening when I'd be forced to see them. The world outside my window seemed unusually still that night. Even the streetlights flickered as if holding their breath. The neighborhood, usually full of distant voices and passing cars, had sunk into a calm that felt too intentional. I sat on the edge of my bed, scrolling aimlessly through my phone, pretending I wasn't listening for something, anything, to pull me out of the silence. And then it came. A knock, soft at first. Then again, louder, more certain. My heart reacted before my mind did, jumping into a faster, uneven rhythm. I wasn't expecting anyone. I wasn't waiting for anyone. But something inside me whispered that I already knew who it was. I hesitated before opening the door. 100 thoughts raced through my mind, questions, warnings, possibilities I didn't dare acknowledge. But the moment I turned the handle, all of them quieted. He stood there in the dim hallway light, one hand tucked into his pocket, the other resting loosely by his side. His expression was unreadable at first, calm, but not emotionless, serious, but not cold. His eyes held something I couldn't quite name. Something that made my breath catch in my throat. "Hey," he said, voice low and steady, just one word, but it shifted the air between us. I leaned against the door frame, trying to act casual, but I could feel the tension building beneath my skin. "Is everything okay?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced past me into the quiet of my room before meeting my eyes again. There was a hesitation there, a silence before that felt heavier than the words that eventually followed. "Can we talk?" he said, simple. Direct. But it hit me like a spark to dry grass. I stepped aside, letting him in. The moment he crossed the threshold, the world seemed to shrink around us. My small room felt different with him inside, denser, fuller, as if the walls themselves were paying attention. He walked in slowly, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense in a way he probably didn't realize. I watched his back as he stood facing the window, the faint orange glow of the streetlight outlining the edges of his silhouette. He didn't speak right away, and the silence stretched between us, thin and trembling like a wire pulled too tight inside my chest. Something fluttered uneasily. He finally turned, and the look in his eyes sent a shiver through me. Not fear. Not anger. Something else, something unfamiliar and dangerous in its quiet intensity. "What I'm about to say. I've been holding onto it for a long time," he murmured. His voice sounded different, lower, steadier, almost vulnerable. And as he watched me, waiting for my reaction, I felt the ground beneath me shift. A warning in my mind whispered, "This moment will change everything." I didn't know how. I didn't know whether I was ready, but I stepped closer anyway, and in that tiny movement, the night began to unfold into something neither of us could ever take back. If you'd like, I can now write part 1, visual prompts, or the next section of the story. His fingers were still on my wrist, barely touching, just the edge of his skin against mine, yet it felt like the entire house tilted around us, like gravity had been waiting for this exact moment to shift. Adrian wasn't breathing normally, or neither was I. The storm outside rattled the window again, but it sounded distant now, muffled, as if everything beyond the living room had faded to static. The only sound I heard clearly was his shaky exhale drifting across that tiny space between us. He seemed afraid to move, afraid to break whatever fragile thing had settled over us. And in a strange, terrifying way, so was I. His thumb brushed the inside of my wrist, soft, slow, like he was memorizing the shape of me with barely their movements. The warmth of his touch spread through my arm, unsettling, electric, impossibly gentle. I felt my breath catch, and Adrian noticed. His eyes flickered up to mine, searching, questioning, almost pleading. "I didn't mean for it to go this far tonight," he whispered, his voice cracked, "but I can't pretend anymore." The honesty in his tone stung. Not because it was wrong, but because it was too real. I wanted to speak, but my voice stayed trapped in my throat. My mind raced with thoughts I couldn't form into sentences. What was happening? What were we doing? What would happen next? What would this change? Too many questions, too many consequences, and yet I didn't pull away. That scared me most. Adrian stepped half an inch closer. Not enough to touch anything more than my wrist, but enough that I could feel his breath warm against my cheek. The closeness made my pulse jump beneath his fingers. He felt it, his breath hitched again. "I can feel your heartbeat," he murmured. "It's fast." "So is yours," I whispered back before I realized I said it. His eyes widened slightly. It was the smallest sign of vulnerability, but it hit like a punch. He wasn't hiding anymore. He wasn't pretending to be indifferent. All of his walls were down, and I was staring directly into everything he'd been trying not to feel. He swallowed. "I don't know what happens after this." "Neither do I confessed. A shaky silence settled between us. Then, cautiously, he lifted his other hand, moving slowly enough that I could stop him if I wanted. I didn't. His fingertips hovered near my jaw, trembling. He didn't touch me. He just hovered there, waiting. "I'm scared," he admitted quietly, hearing him say it. Adrian, the unshakable, unreadable, impossible to rattle Adrian, made something in my chest collapse. "What are you scared of?" I asked softly. "You," he echoed, but it wasn't an accusation. It was an admission, because if I'm wrong about this, he shook his head. "I don't know how to come back from it." For a moment, neither of us said anything. He finally let his hand drop from the air. But he didn't step back. His fingers stayed curled around my wrist, holding on like he wasn't ready to lose the anchor it had become. "I shouldn't have read your notebook," he whispered. "I know it crossed a line." I shook my head. "No. It's my fault too. I left it open." "I shouldn't have written." "You should have," he interrupted gently. "It's the only honest thing either of us has done in weeks." My breath trembled. The storm softened outside, turning into a steady rhythm, less violent, more distant. But inside the room, the tension only grew heavier, thicker, harder to breathe through. "What do we do now?" I whispered. He closed his eyes for a moment, like he was gathering strength he didn't have. "We don't decide tonight," he said. "Not when everything is like this." I nodded slowly, disappointment and relief tangled so tightly I couldn't separate them. He loosened his grip on my wrist, but didn't let go. The warmth lingered, the fear lingered, the want lingered. Finally, he stepped back half a pace, enough to give me air but not enough to feel safer. "I don't want to ruin what we have," he murmured. "And I don't want to lose you." "You won't," I said instinctively, but we both knew the truth was more complicated than that. Some lines bend, some lines blur, and some lines, once crossed, never disappear. He released my wrist slowly, almost reluctantly. The moment his touch left my skin, I felt the weight of everything crash down. Adrian looked at me one last time, eyes heavy with everything we hadn't said, everything we weren't ready to admit out loud. Then he whispered, "Let's just breathe tonight. We can talk in the morning." He turned toward the door, paused, and without looking back, he said, "Unless morning changes everything." The door creaked softly as he opened it, and the moment he stepped into the hallway, I knew the morning would change everything, whether we wanted it to or not. If you'd like, I can now write the final cliffhanger conclusion, 400 to 600 words, to complete the full story structure. The click of the door settling into its frame felt louder than it should have. Too final. Too deliberate. The kind of sound that sends a quiet chill up your spine because it means the outside world has been shut out. Intentionally, Adrian leaned against it for a moment, his hand still on the doorknob, his breath slightly uneven. Not tired, more like he was gathering himself. Preparing. And that alone made my stomach twist into a knot. He wasn't the type to hesitate, but tonight, he hesitated with every breath. I tried to act calm, but my fingers kept fidgeting with the edge of the sofa cushion. The TV screen cast flickering shadows across the room, dull blues and greys that made the air feel colder. Outside, the rain kept hitting the windows in uneven bursts, sometimes soft, sometimes violent, almost like it was mimicking the rhythm of my heartbeat. I finally said, "You're scaring me a little." His lips twitched. Was that a smile? A smirk? I couldn't tell. "Sorry," he murmured. "Didn't mean to." He took a step forward, and every tiny muscle in my body reacted, not visibly, I hoped, but enough that I could feel the heat rise to my face. I hated that he had that effect on me. Hated that I never understood why. "You said you needed to talk," I reminded him. "Yeah," he whispered. "I do." He sank onto the armchair across from me, but even that felt off. He didn't sit like he usually did, leaned back, casual, careless. Tonight he sat forward, elbows on his knees, tension rolled through every line of his body. For a long moment, there was only the rain between us. Then he said, "Something happened." My mind went blank for a second. The words could have meant anything. Someone hurt him, someone confronted him, something from his past resurfaced. Adrian always carried the kind of silence that suggested there were more stories about him than he'd ever tell, but his eyes didn't look scared, they looked conflicted. "What happened?" I asked gently. Adrian rubbed the side of his face, then his jaw. A nervous gesture. I'd seen it maybe twice in the whole year he'd lived with us. "It's not something I can explain easily," he muttered. "But it's been eating at me for weeks." A flicker of something sharp went through me, curiosity, worry, and something far less innocent. "Is it about your dad?" I asked. He shook his head. "Then what?" He didn't answer. Instead, he looked directly into my eyes. Not a glance. Not a quick shift of attention. A stare, deep. Searching. Almost desperate. The room seemed to shrink around us, pulled tighter by the tension neither of us named. "I need you to listen," he said quietly. "I'm listening. And I need you to be honest with me." My breath caught. "About what?" Another pause. His jaw clenched, like he was forcing himself to hold something back. "About how you see me." My heartbeat slammed into my ribs. "What do you mean?" "Just answer." Adrian, I don't understand." "Yes, you do." His voice was low, thick with something I couldn't identify. "You've been avoiding it." "Same as me." The rain hit the windows harder, almost violently, like the storm outside recognized the storm inside before I did. I shifted uncomfortably. "You're not making sense." He leaned closer. Too close. "You ever notice how you can't look at me when we're alone?" he asked. My cheeks went hot. "That's not." "And how you get quiet whenever I walk into a room?" "That's just." "And how you never say goodnight unless I say it first." I swallowed harshly. "That doesn't mean anything." He tilted his head slightly, eyes narrowing the way they do when he's trying to figure out a lie. "It means something to me," he murmured. The room went painfully quiet. Then he added, "And I think it means something to you too." My pulse thundered, loud, overwhelming, like it was trying to burst through my skin. I looked away, staring at the floor, at the carpet patterns, anywhere but at him. But avoiding his gaze didn't stop me from feeling it. Heavy. Warm. Intense. It was terrifying and familiar. "Adrian," I whispered. "Please, don't make this weird." He gave a soft, humorless laugh. "It's been weird for months." The honesty in his tone hit harder than anything else. He wasn't teasing. He wasn't pushing. He was confessing something he had tried not to feel, and it mirrored something I never dared to acknowledge. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, I'm not trying to screw things up. I'm really not. But tonight, something happened and it made it impossible to keep pretending." My voice was barely there. Pretending what? That there isn't something here. Silence. My chest tightened. My mouth felt dry. Between us, he added. I froze. 1,000 thoughts crashed in my head all at once. Panic, longing, denial, confusion, every feeling fighting for control. My throat tightened, but no words came out. Adrian watched me carefully, like he was trying to read every flicker of emotion on my face. You can tell me I'm wrong, he said softly. Just say it. I'll drop everything. Forget I said any of this. He leaned further forward. Say it. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. He noticed something in his eyes darkened, not with anger, but with certainty. Yeah, he whispered. That's what I thought. I felt my whole body tense. Adrian, don't. Don't what? His voice dropped even lower. Don't say what we both feel. I stood up too quickly, my knees almost buckling. You're misunderstanding. You're tired. You're emotional. You're lying, he said flatly. The word stung because it was true. I backed up a step. He stood too, slowly, like he didn't want to scare me but refused to let me run from the conversation. You think I don't see it? He asked. You think I don't hear the way your voice changes when you talk to me? Or how you get tense when I stand behind you? My heartbeat was a drum now. Loud. Unsteady. You're reading too much into things, I whispered. He shook his head. I'm not. Adrian, look at me. I didn't look at me, he repeated, firmer. I forced myself to lift my eyes. His expression was raw, honest in a way that stripped me bare. No masks, no bravado, no walls. Just him. Vulnerable. Needing answers. What happened tonight? I managed to ask. Start there. He exhaled shakily. I saw something. Something I shouldn't have. What? Doesn't matter. It does. He took a slow step toward me. It was enough to make me realize that hiding how I feel doesn't protect anything. It just hurts. My throat tightened. How you feel? He nodded once. And you want me to say something back? I whispered. No, he murmured. I want you to stop pretending you don't already know. I swallowed hard. And I want you to tell me, he added quietly, why you're so damn scared of me. My breath hitched. I'm not scared of you. Yes, you are. He closed the distance between us until only a few inches separated us. Why? He asked again, softer this time. Why? Because he saw too much, because I felt too much, because the boundaries of our home blurred in ways I didn't know how to handle, because there were things between us I couldn't name, couldn't categorize, couldn't escape, but I didn't say any of that. Instead, I whispered, Adrian, please, just tell me what you want from me. His jaw flexed. Then, very quietly, he said, I want the truth. The rain outside cracked with thunder, shaking the windows, and in that moment, I realized everything was about to change. No matter what I said next. If you'd like, I can continue with the climactic moment, 800 to 1,200 words, in the same tense, dramatic, emotionally charged style. Should I continue?